Got it. All right. Hello, guys. So here I'm gonna talk a bit about conducting secondary market research, particularly macro and industrial analysis. The ultimate goal of this analysis is to really, first of all, size up the opportunity, and based on this, to understand what the macro indicators are saying, whether they have, whether they, whether the indicators present opportunities and or threats for the business. Now, regarding the first objective, a simple framework upon which all of the analysis that you're going to do throughout this market research phase it hinges on is what we like to call the opportunity assessment um, framework, and this basically says that every idea, every every business idea, can be stress tested across four buckets: the problem, the timing, the financial viability of the idea, and the team that will execute every business idea. So whether that's an idea for an early stage company, or whether that's an idea for a mid to large corporate trying to unlock more value, you typically would want to size up ideas from these four perspectives. And so when you think about this, the 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 problem assessment really focuses on the customer side, all right, around how well they understand it, the number of people feeling the problem, and if they have a strong buying power. The timing side focuses a lot on the external factors, which is going to be the core of the rest of this presentation. And that's really looking at the country market fundamentals and then the industry that you're looking into, the fundamentals of that industry as well. And the financial viability really just touches on key aspects of financial viability that are very easy to overlook but could be detrimental to the business. And then, of course, the team, having a framework to really analyze the strength of the team and all of that stuff. Future recordings are going to do a deep dive on the financial viability as well as the team. But this, like I said, we're going to focus a lot more on the timing. Right. So jumping right into it, from a timing perspective, we if you think about it as going from a 50,000 feet and going downwards, usually the first question that you would ask yourself. So if you think about what we've done in the RDT phase, the whole fish project that I was talking about, um, so you have a problem statement, you have the people, you have the solution that you want to do. You now want to figure out whether the timing makes sense. And this framework has said that you should look at you should start with the macroeconomic factors. And I want to believe if you're watching this video by now, you know that the key framework for that is the peso analysis, right? However, one key challenge that tends to come up is that before you can even conduct the peso, the, we find that analysts tend to need to want to know, or anybody really, not just analysts, needs to know what context are we doing the peso, what country are we analyzing for? Because if you do not know this, or if you don't at least make an assumption around it,
it's 16 hours.
Ignore. If you don't at least make an assumption around it, then your peso becomes a lot harder to do, right? So if we're going to analyze political and economic situation for the fish business, are we going to be researching for data for the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, or we're researching for data within the context of Kenya or Nigeria. How do you make that decision? Now, if you think about it, there's one way that a lot of teams do this today without thinking about it critically, and that is by um, by assuming, by just making an assumption, like an executive decision. Oh, we want to do this fish project in Nigeria, so Praise go and conduct the personal analysis for Nigeria. Just no, go and conduct the personal analysis, and automatically Praise will know she's looking at only Nigeria-related data. That could work for some projects, but for some projects that you might be on, maybe your first task is actually to figure out what market you're looking for at a high level, and that's why the framework you see on my screen is really around the location of helping you figure out the location of the industry. And so some some questions that you might you might want to use to streamline the location where the project is going to happen before you start your PESEL or your competitive analysis is really asking. So if you think of it as a scorecard, you really want to ask things around. You really want to ask yourselves questions around um, this problem that we say we want to solve. What locations really feel it the most compared to others? So in our case, if it's a nutritional issue amongst the 18 to 35-year-olds, um, amongst 18 to 35-year-olds, and we figured out that um, we want to fish as a potential solution. So, what locations um, face this the most? That's one criteria to shortlisting the location that the project should probably happen. Another piece is familiarity. So these are all qualitative things. Yeah. You have qualitative and quantitative things that could help you streamline. I'm talking to the qualitative now. Another is familiarity with the market. I mean, if the three of us, if three of us co-founders are Nigerians, right? The chances are we'll probably want to execute a project from a market that we know, right? Um, Versus we've done all of this ideation in RDT, and all of a sudden we're doing peso for the Spanish market, right? Unless there's a special reason why we're doing that. So familiarity also plays a nudge. Of course, there's also resources that you can access. Again, the goal of market research, as you guys know, is of secondary market research is really research. Google is your friend, and so a lot of times you may not access to information may not be very easy. Desktop information, so you also want to consider that. Now, yeah, and needs from the people. Now, with that in mind, some of the other things that we have seen that helps is quantitative stuff like market size, um, the size of the market, the growth rate in that market, and some of the trends. Trends, this is used loosely because trends will depend on the project you're on. What do I mean? So in the case of fish, you're probably looking for trends in the agricultural space, and if possible, particularly along the fish value chain. If it's a fintech company, you're probably looking at trends around payments, savings, withdrawals, that kind of thing. If it's healthcare, you're probably looking at trends around the healthcare infrastructure and what have you. So it will vary according to region. So the goal here is by asking yourselves these qualitative questions, and then by being empirical with the quantitative ones, your team is able to really shortlist from a whole slew of options and narrow it down to where you want to pilot, or where you want to do the project essentially. Um, the context within which you want to research. And with that done, again, all of this English was on the assumption that the team doesn't already know where, what context the project should happen in. With that done, um, macro. So what we're talking about here, as I mentioned, is the PESO framework. My job here on these videos is not really to explain to you um, the business dimension of these frameworks. Yeah, so as much as possible, I wouldn't do that. What I'll just explain is how you can use these frameworks as a tool to optimize your analysis. And just some key call outs for you. The first is that every framework that you're going to be seeing beyond this point, starting with this one, tends to have a legend. All right. On the top left of my screen, these things have been ranked from strong opportunity to strong threats. And what we're saying here is that everything is every insight you get from your research is either going to be an opportunity or a threat. Now, in between, it could either be strong opportunity or strong threat, or mild low opportunity, mild low threat. The whole goal of strategy is not to run away from threats. Strategy is just basically identifying opportunities, identifying threats, and then designing approaches to maximize opportunities and mitigate threats. That's strategy. And so that is why for us it's important that we articulate in a very empirical way all of these opportunities and threats, and so that further down the road as we're designing the go-to-market strategy, we're able to bring in initiatives that maximize opportunity and then mitigate threats. The other thing here that is noteworthy is around the fact that the tool is it's very empirical, and again, your framework here is your typical PESO, but what's interesting are these columns of weights and scores. And what this simply means is that at the end of the day, where we hope you can get to is where you have a score at the end of your analysis. All right? Where you have a score. That's it. But to get to where you have a score, a few things you need to do to set this up. Two key things, actually. The first one is that you need to determine what the weights are, what the weights should be for each of these. Now, Oluchi, how do you determine the weights? I don't know. It's subjective. It largely depends on the nature of the project you're running. Let me give you an example. In our case, with the fish project, it's fish, it's agriculture. So some of these levers in the PESO framework will carry more weight than others. Should we know the political landscape? Is it important? Yes. The economic landscape? Yes. Social? Yes. The technology landscape? Maybe not. So maybe I would give the technology landscape a 10%, right? Um, Environmental? Yes, absolutely. It's fish. So maybe I would give this a 20%. And then from a legal point of view, is it as important? No, maybe I'll give this a 5%, right? And so with this, there you go. You want to make sure that it all adds up to 100%. So maybe I'll give environmental 25%, right? And you're done. So you simply choose the weight the based on the nature of the project, and you please make sure that the sub items all add up to that as well. So the items on the environment should add up to 25. Done. The other thing that you want to do in setting this up is really around determining what the sub items should be here. This template here ladies and gentlemen, is just a template for you. But the specific things that you want to research on the political and economic are really up to you and dependent on the project. Now, this template can help get your mind, moving. If you go online, there's so many PESO framework templates that show you literally hundreds of questions under each of the buckets of PESO. You just pick the ones that are most relevant to the nature of your project and you fill them in here. What you want to make sure you do is just always add a new row. If you want to add, just add a new row to it. Yeah, do not delete rows, just add to it. Or if the rows are enough, just type on top of it and everything should be fine. The other thing here is that for this to work, you want to, so let's assume you have looked at, say, government resource allocation to support the industry, and you've gotten your insights. I'm going to talk about that last. Um, you want to score for this template to work. You want to score. Yeah, you want to give it a score. And how do you arrive at the score? Remember our grid at the top? Exactly. So this is you saying this particular point, is it a strong opportunity or a strong threat or mild low, and based on that understanding you give it a score. It's also subjective, but if you do it well, you can always back up your score. Just be ready, be prepared to back it up, right? Yeah. So imagine a world where you're scoring. At the end of the day, you're going to end up here. You're going to end up here with a total score that helps you. The final piece is insights. Now, insights is something you're going to see throughout this workbook. And what you want to do is essentially make sure that your insights here are as detailed and as descriptive as possible. You want to make them specific, measurable, synthesized, right? Because part of what the innovation toolkit workbook does for you, beyond just codifying this process, it actually helps you capture all of your insights and research in one place. The goal here is to reduce duplication of effort. So you want to make sure that your insights are as synthesized and as punchy and measurable as possible, so that after all of your analysis, when the time comes to prepare a pitch deck, it would literally be a 1 day activity. You're literally copying your insights from here into a deck, working on design and infographics, and that's it, right? So this is really the work to make sure that you're not just typing random incomplete sentences that only you understand, but they're detailed and, more importantly, they're synthesized and measurable and quantifiable. And feel free to add links to resources so that you remember where you got certain insights from. Yeah. So use it as a workbook, and that's it. This thing I just mentioned, the same happens in the case of the industrial analysis, which is really the Porter's 5 framework. Again, I will not be explaining the Porter's 5 framework in this video. Um, my goal here is how to use the template, which, as I've said before, the same process. You fix the weights. Yeah, this is not correct because it is not going to 100. There you go. Somebody is not taking it. Yeah. And you can score and everything will be fine. Yeah. What's important is that um, for you to really get the value here, um, I think one of the things that tends to be the one of the things that tends to be the most controversial piece in when doing this competitive analysis is around barriers to entry. Yeah. The around the around yeah around barriers to entry. And so what you tend to have is around threats of new entrants. Um, I've gotten asked plenty of times, is it good or bad if the threats of new entrants is high? Is that good? Versus if it is bad, is that good? I think that the most important thing to know here is that it is situational, and there's a whole blurb of text here for you to read. The bottom line, the key takeaway is that when you're a startup, um, if the barrier to entry is low, that means you can enter the market easily, right? But then if you can enter the market easily, it means that the threat of other new entrants is also high. So what you want to do is that, yes, it's easier for you to get in and get a foothold in the market, but you you want to ensure that as you grow, um, we're baking more redundancy into the business and into the operations, so that um, it creates some sort of an artificial barrier to entry for other people. Yeah, in order to reduce potential competition. And so, again, threats of new entrants, situational. If you're an established, uh, if it's an established company, then yes, that's a different ballgame. But when you're a new startup, you need the threat, you need the barrier to entry to be low so you can come in. But then why we follow this rigorous process of innovation ideation is so that we can bake in multiple levels of innovation in our business model, so that even though we enter this market, right, because we are an incumbent, we're able to, for someone to get up and compete with us, they would have a few layers to jump, right? So for when you're going through this process for your company, please think from this persptive: what stage of growth is the company that I'm doing? What stage of growth is it in? And that's the best way to understand how I should analyze the perspective I should take for the threats of new entrants lever. And with this, guys, again, just a quick recap: opportunity assessment across the four different levels. That's really what we're trying to do. The rest of this session focused heavily on timing, and timing is primarily driven by two key frameworks, and that's your macro and your peso and your Porter's 5. But then we also established that before you even start your Porter's 5 or your peso, in the case where you don't even know the location where your team wants to do the project, the first challenge really is in shortlisting or streamlining that, figuring that. And we talk through a quick framework that could help you um, ask certain qualitative questions among yourselves, and then quantitative questions to help you streamline the context where the location where you want to do the project before you can do your peso and your Porter's 5. In the next video, I will be going on to market research, secondary research part 2. This time around, we'll be looking more around trying to figure this guy out, the problem. So from the customer perspective. All right. Okie dokie. Where do you stop this recording? Stop recording.